greetings from the churches of your Grafton Orange Sullivan Association. And given your connection with our sacred thin space, I want to bring you greetings and congratulations from all of our staff, both our hired staff and our volunteer staff at Horton Center. And I just want to offer a few words of gratitude this day. Gratitude for your witness down through the ages and the witness which John is inspiring you to in the days to come. I want to give you gratitude for your stewardship. John mentioned in his lead into the sermon your giving to our church's wider mission, and that's something that I think you have heard from me on and other occasions. But our church's wider mission is only part of the stewardship of CCDC. You all are also very generous with the time and energy of your members, including staff, but also your lay members, as you serve in association committees, conference committees, supporting Horton Center, all kinds of ways in the wider church. And indeed, we are so profoundly grateful for that. And I want to give gratitude for this very moment, for who you have been over 250 years, for who you are in this moment, and for whom you are yet to be. May God add blessing on your continued journey.
Thank you so much, Gordon. And I apologize for interrupting during your talk. We've been asked to record this part of the service so that those who are not able to be with us today are. That's why we did. And I just want to alert everyone else that we are recording this. Thank you so much for being with us today and for the ministry that we share together. Carla Bailey.
Nice to see you. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to see you all. Hearing from Mandy and Rob, though, about keeping this time short, I want to do that. We were supposed to respond to a quick question. Where did we go and what did we do after we left Church of Christ? So since I'm probably one of the more recent departees, I went to Minnesota, which turns out to have not been the best decision I ever made. And we were there for 3 years and then came back to New England. So I'm now the senior minister at the Second Church in Newton, United Church of Christ here in West Newton. And the time here has been interesting, rewarding, challenging. So Warren is on the Zoom link. I think Joe is on the Zoom link. Patrika is down in Washington, D.C. And we are all doing fine. And seeing your faces has been just the best gift of all. My memories are so varied and so many that I couldn't even begin to start talking about them all. We did big things together, but my memories and my joy and my sense of longing for you really come from all of the smaller moments, the conversations that we had in passing as we led up to big decisions, as we processed after big decisions were made. Those are the moments that mean the most to me, and those friendships and those kindnesses that you show to me and to my family. I can assure you that not every church exhibits that same love. So it's wonderful to know and to remember you with all of the love that I can possibly give to you. Congratulations, 250 years. Phew.
Thank you so much, Carla. Shana Appel. Shana, we see you unmuted, but we don't see you. Maybe Shana walked away, so we'll go to Don McKenzie, and then if Shana comes back, we'll invite her to participate.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mandy, and thanks, Carla, for setting the stage for this. Nice to see you. We came to Hanover in 1983. We had been in Princeton, New Jersey, 16 years, Beirut before that. And our time in Hanover was just magnificent, and we were We received so many gifts from the congregation in terms of opportunities and inspiration. We hold these things in our heart to this day. We're so glad to be with you. Congratulations. When we left Hanover, we moved to Seattle, Washington, where we lived for 18 years, and then moved back to Minnesota, where we went to college, and we have a lot of family in 2013. Memories include the search committee, which was something that really helped me to grow in my vocation. Of the 9 people on the committee chaired by Wayne Braille, only 4 are still alive. Margaret Jernstedt is the only one still in Hanover. Hi, Margaret. Others are Barbara Thompson, Frank Rowland, and Patty Calvert. I really am so grateful to that committee and how they helped me get started and sustain me during that ministry. Also, the capital campaign that we had called Time for Renewal, co-chaired by Roger and Carolyn Miller. They moved to Seattle, and so we saw lots of them during our time there. The Goodnight Irene Cafe was a time when singing together gave us that really important sense of being together and the fact that we're all connected. And then finally, my interfaith work over the last 20 years has been very inspiring to me. And one of the moments was when we presented at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College 10 years ago. And we just happened to be there on the Sunday. The peace pole was dedicated, a peace pole given by Joan Wider in memory of Dud Wider. And I was so glad that we could be there. Judy and Ted and Jamal and I were all there for that. So thanks be to God for the ministry of the church. It's just wonderful to see everybody.
I'd like to add a word or two. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. For me, I think Hanover was a good place for our family, for our kids. I think we all felt very supported, and I appreciate all of that. It was in some ways an idyllic place for our children to have spent their childhood, and our children now are, as some of you know, our kids are Korean and all grown up and both happily married to Californians. So so we have to go there or they have to come here, but it's hard now. What would we do without Zoom? Without, to see our kids. Another facet of our lives in Hanover, I think that supported our family was my work at the college with international students as director of the international office. And that allowed our family to be much more international and multicultural and multiracial, and our kids to have a much broader range of experience. As far as memories, I think for me, a memory from every Sunday is the coffee hour in the Batchelder Lounge and the kids up on the balcony kind of poking their head, not their heads, but poking over the railings, and just the multi-generational aspect of that. So I miss all of you. We see some of you when we're back, and this is just such a wonderful occasion. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Judy. Shana, are you with us now?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces. I was trying to remember when I served, and I think it was somewhere around 2004 to 2007, somewhere in there. Favorite memories. I was living in Brattleboro and serving up in Hanover. So the Sibleys gave me a room at their house, John and Jean. And I remember fondly sitting with them in the morning and drinking coffee, and just coming into the day was so lovely. I really remember quite fondly the kindness with which I was embraced by this congregation. It was pretty new in my ministry, very new in my ministry. In fact, my ordination happened at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College. So I was pretty green behind the ears, and quite honestly, a little freaked out to be serving such an awesome church. So thank you for your kindnesses and your patience and your tenacity and the formation that you all offered me. That was really quite a gift. When I left Dartmouth, I went down to Townsend, Massachusetts. To get to Townsend, you drive to nowhere, drive 15 minutes past that, you'll be in Townsend. I served as a solo minister there for a while, and then did an interim at the Peterborough Unitarian Universalist Church, then the Jaffrey Congregational Church in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, then West Brattleboro, and now finally back, and I get to serve the Unitarian Universalist Church where I live, and I also get to serve as vice moderator for the Hillsborough Association, the New Hampshire Conference United Church of Christ, along with some volunteer gigs on the fire department and trauma response ministry teams. It's really, it's been a gift. It's busy. It's great. It's a weird time to do ministry. What can I tell you? But it is so lovely to see all of your faces again. This is really exciting. Thank you, thank you, thank you for putting all this together.
Absolutely. We're delighted to have you, Shannon. Donna.
Yeah, and I echo those thanks as well. When everybody was coming up on the screen, I couldn't help but feeling heartful and teary. It is so good to see so many of you again. I served as associate from, I think, 1999 through 2005, and moved to Arizona in 2006. I became a state park ranger for several years, which really helped me learn about all of the desert and all of the animals and flora and fauna. So that was a pretty good experience. Served as associate at Church of the Red Rocks in Sedona, and then did interim ministry in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Las Cruces, New Mexico, most recently. And I'm testing retirement waters during this pandemic time. And I just must say, for all clergy who are active at this time, you have my prayers and my deep thanks for being able to hold church services on Zoom or whatever means that you are doing. It's remarkable. A memory I have was a September morning in Carla's office. It was a beautiful morning. Warren called to tell us of the attacks on September 11th. And the doors had always been unlocked to the sanctuary, but we went and flung them open. And when I remember looking down the path to the communion table, the one lit candle that gave hope and courage to the flocks of folks that came that day and that week. And that memory is just embedded. It's one I think of a lot. So it is good to be with you and to share that thought with you as well.
Donna, thank you for joining with us. It's really lovely to see you. Janet Nelson Cooper, or Janet Cooper Nelson, I apologize.
Somebody with too many names, always confusing the world. It's wonderful, wonderful to see everyone. Mandy, I just have to say thank you for pulling a history together that includes so many faces that we all haven't had a chance to meet you, and congratulations and thank you for being the pastor at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College. It means a lot to many of us. I walked into Hanover as a fieldwork student. Steve, my husband, also a grateful member of the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, had come up to open the Kala Center, which the building doesn't even exist in the way that it did, but he and a dear friend were involved in consulting and came to Hanover, and then Dartmouth said to Steve, please come and open the building. I was in my first year at Harvard Divinity School, and the idea of trying to make life make any sense that way was crazy, so I walked into a pastor's office I'd never met, Park P. Dickerson, an extraordinary person who walks with me every day of my life for things he taught me. And I said to him, I know a few things about college students and high school students, and I don't know if you'd have anything to do because I don't know anything about the church, and I'm not even sure this is where I'm headed. I would learn later from Normie that Park had just come back from a retreat with the Alpha Omega Fellowship and was so sore from sleeping on the floor of Harris Cabin that all he could think of was, I've got to ring her. Yes, give her the college students, whatever she wants to do. From there, for 2 more years, I was a field student and then assistant on a part-time basis. I think you guys paid me $19,000 a year to work half-time. I worked out in Thetford the other half, and then I stayed on and was still there when Park went on to Montclair, and Don arrived with Judy and the girls who were tiny. And Steve and I were both ordained 40 years ago this year. Me in November, Steve in April. And 2 years later, with a Russian bishop in the chancel, Jeff was baptized. And in 1984, I headed off to be dean of the chapel at Mount Holyoke College because Mary Maslin told me I had to. And I loved it, just loved it. And then from there to Vassar for 2 years, and now for 31 years at Brown University as chaplain, where I lead a team of just the most amazing associates. And so this isn't exactly a memory. This is really a huge, big, wrapped up with a ribbon thank you. I didn't have a church, and the Church of Christ took me in. There's an amazing line of Isaac Watts that ends a hymn, and it says, "No more a stranger nor a guest, but like a child at home." That's what I felt like when I arrived in Hanover. And I mean by that, that when the green M&Ms that Alpha Omega shot around the Batchelder Lounge, as Judy described, because it wasn't just the little kids, it was the bigger ones. When they ended up in the piano and Madeline Alexander was ready to kill me, I didn't lose my job. When we were really pretty strongly on the left-hand side of the political spectrum for all kinds of reasons, refugee work, particularly Central America, you know, we had a board of elders that listened. This church was then and is now, certainly in my personal life, and Steve's too, and he sends his love, he's not here, but I can count 45 people that this church was home to when they were students, who went on to teach religion, went on in ministry, went on in lay roles that are their ministries. This church is generative in the very way that Eliezer Wheelock hoped it could be and gathered it to be. But I just want to hold up the fact that at Dartmouth College is not a minor piece of your life. And for me personally, I never would have been able to come through the doors because I didn't know anything about the church, and you taught me a lot. So it's a big thank you, but it's also a hope that that ministry at the college will always continue to be, as it's been for you, a warm and welcoming and generous piece, because it's made the next generations of the church much richer and much better. Mandy, thank you for leading it, but thanks to everybody. So many loving faces on this call. It's just making me kind of weep through the whole thing, but that's cool. I love it. Wonderful to see you all. Thank you. And Steve sends his best. Jeff and partner Angela are in Harlem these days. He's leads an English department, and we are well, both working full time. And I'm half vaccinated, so I'm grateful.
Blessings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Jeff Barton.
Yes, and thank you to everyone. It's great to see so many people from across the country. Susan, along with preschoolers, Jed and Katie and I came to Hanover in 1987. Chris Jernstead was chair of the search committee. And I give thanks to him and the committee, to Don and to Margot for helping us come to the hills of New England, from whence we found our help, having gone out from the mountains of the West in Idaho at that time. I give thanks as well to the congregation and to all the various members and friends of it for making it possible for us to return to do our coming in and back to the West in 1993. It was a wonderful opportunity, and we continue to give thanks as a family for all of the different sorts of things that we learned and that we experienced and that we cherish. Susan has remained in Billings, Montana. Jed lives there as well. Katie and her husband, Justin, live in Sacramento, California. After leaving Mayflower Church in Billings, Montana in 2001, mostly I've been doing interim ministry, interim ministries, which is how I got to meet John Dorhauer in his Southwest Conference. Through those processes, a lot of good experience, a lot of lessons from Hanover that have been used and reused and used again. Marilyn and I have been married almost 8 years, and almost 4 years ago, we retired to this spot, Frederick, Colorado, just north of Denver and just east of Longmont, where Mark and Margot are. So it's a great reunion of sorts. Again, as I look to the hills from whence comes my help, it's very nice to have those hills be mountains again, and we give thanks. One memory in the midst of all of that, Don mentioned the capital campaign. Don went on sabbatical, some of you remember, when in the midst of the reconstruction of making the building fully accessible. So I got to work with the Board of Elders during a lot of those confusions and celebrations, but lift up mostly the opportunity that the campus center became, turning it from what I called a refugee camp into a facility. Remember Bert and Jeff being our hosts at a place where we could actually welcome students and programs and activities during those years. That was one of many, many, many fond memories. Blessings to you all. Thank God for the ministry of the Church of Christ, the United Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, as I insist on calling it. In retirement, a bunch of us are doing an anti-racism study together via Zoom. And I enjoy talking about my shock the first time I went on campus to give blood and to find out that nobody knew what the Church of Christ of Dartmouth College was. They thought I worked at the white church.
We still fight that nomenclature. I think we should paint this building green and call us the Green Church, but thank you so much, Jeff, for being with us and for all that you've shared with this community. Jeff Erb.
Hi, it's really great to see all these faces from the blast from the past, as they are. Hopefully I make this through this without breaking down. I served as associate pastor, and I was like one of the participants mentioned, rather green behind the ears. I was 24 years old. I am now 68. I began in 1977. I was there till 85. I worked with some great people. I worked with Park Dickerson, and he was unbelievable. He was a great mentor and just a person you could trust your life with. Basically, I just kind of thank Park every day because I always wonder when I'm at church and then there's a problem, and I say, what would Park do?
Yeah.
What would Park do? And then after that, I'd ask, what would Janet do? Janet Cooper Nelson. And then what would Don do? And so, you know, people have become very important, the people I work with there. And all you that I see, Roger Aaron was on the search committee. He was the chair. And just a brief memory there. Roger was always one to remind me that I wasn't the first choice. And hi, Roger. My memory, after I left the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, I ended up in Western Mass. And I served in Chesterfield, out in the hills beyond Northampton and Amherst. I went from there to Palmer, Mass, off of Exit 8, of the Turnpike, Mass Pike, and now I'm at Union Church in Ludlow off of exit 7 of the Mass Pike. As for a memory, well, I have a whole bunch just looking at everybody, but the first memory, and I'd be killed if my wife was in a room, not to mention that I met her when I was there. She came to photograph everybody for directory. And I attacked pretty quickly. And we went for drinks and kind of led to marriage and 2 children who are now grown and on their own as well. Another memory serves me well. And again, I'm reminded by all the folk I see from that time. And that's the youth group trips we used to take every spring. So those are the fond memories that I have at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, place I always keep in my heart.
Thank you so much for being with us, Jeff, and for giving so much of yourself, even as you clearly connected with much of the church. Blessings. Nancy Hayes Kilgore.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see some familiar faces. Jan and the McFarlands and a bunch of other people that I'm sure not all of you remember me. I was there in 95 to 97 as interim associate pastor. This was the 8th interim pastorate I'd done, and the first one, which was associate. And I worked with the youth group and with the college kids, and I have some fond memories of those. And especially when we went on retreats, we went out to Rob and Deb's camp up in New Hampshire. I forget the town, but that was really fun and just amazing that Rob is still there and in another capacity now in the church. So I'm a pastoral counselor and have been for about 30 years. And I now live in Burlington, Vermont, and I've also been a novelist. I've been writing novels, and my 3rd novel will come out in August. So.
Great. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much for being with us. Blessings. Margot.
Hello. You can hear me?
We can, yes, and see you.
Okay, great. Okay. So Mark and I just told him I would show his smiling face too, moved up to the Upper Valley in 1985, and we were already friends with Don and Judy because we all lived together in Princeton and did ministry together in Princeton. I was an associate minister there from 1986 to 1995. And from there, Mark and I moved to Durham, North Carolina, home of our beloved Blue Devils, and lived there. We were called as co-pastors of Pilgrim United Church of Christ. I left parish ministry for a while and was the director of a program called the Pastoral Leadership Development Program, which was an alternative track to ordination for folks in the Southern Conference. And when I left that, I did some interim ministry for a while. And then 2 years ago, we retired and we moved here to Longmont, Colorado, just west of Frederick, which I'm sure you all know. And it's in Boulder County. And we moved here because our daughter and son-in-law and our 2 grandchildren live here. And our other daughter has been without work this year, so she is living here too. So that's our COVID bubble. It is delightful to see so many folks. And the memories that I have, I had responsibility for youth work, and in particular, the confirmation program, which some of you may remember I see Jan laughing. Her daughters went through it. I inherited a 2-year confirmation curriculum. It was wonderful and very comprehensive. I think we only kept it at 2 years for a little tiny while. So I loved being with the kids, and made great friends with the adult leaders, starting with John Mullins, who I saw them in their car at some point today. Yeah, we took great trips, just like Jeff Erb was saying, to rural Maine, where we helped a group of nuns build houses, and they knew how to wield electric chainsaws like nobody's business. And we went down to New York City, stayed at St. John the Divine, and we also went to Washington, DC. And then when John and Susan moved to Washington, DC, Rob Grable took the place as the lay leader, and I guess he had such a good time that he just stayed forever. Yeah. I would say one of the things that's on my list of the accomplishments or achievements that I'm most proud of is I worked with the Board of Deacons for Social Action, and with leadership from Jean Sibley and the knitting group, Hyun Hee, and I'm wearing one of their sweaters today, but it's too warm in Colorado for this sweater. Today it's about 50 degrees. And we started the Christmas market with a difference. And it was a fledgling thing that I have watched grow over the years, and I am just so impressed with how it has grown, and so grateful to you all for continuing it, and the great impact that it has had around the world. It was a great time being there. As Judy said, it was a wonderful place to raise our children, and they still, all these years later, if you ask them where they came from, they would say Norwich, Vermont. So yeah, great to be with you.
Thank you so much, Margot, for joining us. And thanks for the greetings from the Colorado slopes that began the service. That's just fabulous. We are just so pleased to have all of you and to hear these memories and these different times when things happened at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College. So Mary Kath Cunningham, will you say hello and give us a few words?
I will, and thank you so much, Mandy, for tracking me down. I am absolutely delighted to be here. We are going back in time. I was Wheelock resident from 1974 to 1976. Lived in the church apartment, where I would sometimes open the door and be asked, "Are you the janitor's wife?" It was a very interesting situation. There weren't many women in ministry in the mid-70s, and I appreciate how supportive the church was of a woman in ministry at that time, who had to say, "No, I'm not the janitor's wife." I would rise to my full 5'2" and announce that I was one of the pastors of the church, and had actually been ordained in that setting. I worked with Park Dickerson and Heidi Hoskin, and I think Normie and Heidi are on this Zoom call, so special greetings to both of you. When I left Hanover, I returned to Yale University and earned a PhD in theology. And I've taught in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at North Carolina State University since the mid-80s. And I continue to teach full-time. I refuse to retire. Of course, we're all online now, so I have great sympathies with problems with technology. So I have totally adapted. I was a technological dinosaur, but in a very short time, I picked up a lot of new tech tricks. So you can teach old dogs new tricks, and it really does work very well. So again, it was an unusual time to be a woman in ministry in the 1970s. I was very young and I had long blonde hair, which I pinned up every single week to try to look more authoritative. And I was very short. Park was very tall. And he had to round up a little platform for me to stand on behind the pulpit so that I could actually be seen. And I tend to move around a lot with my classes. I'm a very active teacher when I'm in the classroom. And on occasion, I kind of fell off my little perch. So what can I say? It was an interesting time. Alpha Omega became Alpha Omega under my tutelage. I worked very hard to recruit students from Dartmouth for the college group, and they dubbed themselves Alpha Omega. And it was really just one of the wonderful times of my life working with them. Particularly gratifying to me was being asked to return when the students that I had worked with were graduating from Dartmouth. So I came back to preach at the time when they were graduating. And what was most gratifying was that they were all still there, that I had done my job. I had built them as into the church itself. So they were now a vital part of the community. They weren't considered some outreach concern. They were a vital part of the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College. And it was just wonderful to see them all. And building on what Janet said, in my travels, the many conferences that I go to, I encounter students from Alpha Omega who are now in the business, shall we say, pastors and academics. And so this church did a wonderful job of making a commitment to students, building them as full members of the church, get them to join, make them an integral part of the church. Don't see them as an outreach concern, see them as full members, and then send them forth to do all kinds of wonderful things. So again, I'm so pleased to be here. As I say, refuse to retire, and all my pastoral skills, which were nurtured in the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, have come into full bloom here during the pandemic. I have so many students that say to me, "You're so kind, you're so compassionate, you're so understanding." I said, well, isn't that our job? But I think those pastoral skills are really, really important as we try to work in these very trying times. So again, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here again, thriving, sent forth so well and started off so well. Oh, and by the way, my work is in science and religion, the issue of God and evolution. So I continue to stay relevant with a very hot topic.
Thank you so much, Mary Kath. It's lovely to see you. John Vanderzee.
Hi, everybody. I thank Mandy for searching me out. I was really touched when you contacted me and asked me to participate. It was such a wonderful thing. I must have followed Mary Kath as the leader of the Alpha Omega group. That was the school year 1976 to 77. And we had approximately 12 in our group. And it was just a wonderful 9 months of ministry there. I also was under the tutelage of Park Dickerson, who did such a wonderful job of mentoring me, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. A couple of memories. Oh, let me share where I have gone from there. I was ordained in June of 77 at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College. My brother, Leonard Vanderzee, preached the sermon that Sunday. And I went on to hospital chaplaincy, where I served for 35 years in hospital chaplaincy in Iowa, in Des Moines, Iowa, in suburban Chicago, and then for 24 years at the Indiana University Health Bloomington Hospital, where I retired in 2014. Since then, I have taken on a coaching business, life and leadership coaching business, and I will shamelessly put that in the chat room, my my website. One of my, I just have very fond memories of teaching Bible study with Alpha Omega, and such a wonderfully contributing group of students. I also have a kind of an unusual memory. I remember trying to sleep one night while a big party was going on at SAE across the driveway. And finally, I just gave up, walked over to SAE, joined them, and talked to some of the students, had a couple of beers, just enough to get me back so I could go back to sleep. So it was, I'll always remember not very fondly SAE interrupting my sleep almost every night. Congratulations to everybody on celebrating this 250th anniversary, and blessings to all. Oh, one other shout out to a couple who may be deceased who welcomed me with open arms, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember their names. He was the professor of Spanish at can somebody help me remember?
The Russells. Bob and
Yes.
Judy Russell.
Yes, the Russells. Are they still alive?
They are alive in their legacy. June died before Bob. When Bob was ending his life, he left an extraordinarily generous gift to the Church of Christ at Dartmouth, financial gift, to be used for outreach and education, and to be spent within 10 years, not to put it for a rainy day, not to wait for something else, but to use it in the efforts that supported most what he and June cared about. So we speak about the Russells frequently, and we are
Oh,
grateful.
wonderful. Thanks for helping me remember. They kind of parented me during that 9 months, and I appreciate them so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Don. Great to see you. And now we invite Heidi Hoskin, excuse me.
My husband Garland and I joined this church in 1970. So we were here for the bicentennial when Park Dickerson was senior minister. Our children were baptized and confirmed here and nurtured by the youth ministry of Jeff Erb. Hi, Jeff. I think some of your kids are here with us on Zoom. I was ordained in this church and was the education minister. At that time, we had 2 Sunday morning worship services. The 9 o'clock service down in the Batchelor Lounge, which was very meaningful to intergenerational congregation. Up to 100 people gathered, but it was missed that we were not worshiping together. So soon, and now, of course, we are worshiping at the same time in the same place. But memories of the 9 o'clock service are still alive. And I'm so glad, Mandy, that you blessed us with "Go forth with God." The world awaits the coming of the just and strong, because that's what we sing every Sunday. And if my son is on Zoom, his heart will flutter to hear that song. I was, as I said, my ecclesiastical council was held here, and in the course of being questions as to the my fitness for ministry, one person asked how I got to be so organized. And a childhood memory came to mind that in anticipation of night air raids during World War II, we needed to be prepared, have our clothes laid out so we could just jump in and grab our backpacks and run to the bunker for shelter. And one member of the council stood up and said, "While Heidi rushed to the bunker, I flew overhead, ready to throw a bomb onto her town. And as he said that, tears streamed down his face. And people say that this got me approval for ordination rather than anything else. Go figure. Garland and I are now members of the First Congregational Church of Hanover Center, UCC, and legend has it that that church was founded by students of Eleazar Wheelock. So like you all, we have rich and sweet memories of wonderful pastors and friends and saints who from their labors rest. And I am certain smile on this day and on the wonderful ministry of Mandy and Rob and Rita. Thank God.
Thank you so much for being with us, Heidi. It's wonderful to have you here. We had expected Normie Dickerson, who was Park's wife, to be able to greet us today, but I don't see her in the list, on the list of Zoom attendees. And so Normie does bring great greetings. I had a nice long phone call conversation with her. Park died in 2015, and many of you have spoken about what an extraordinarily powerful influence he had on your lives and congregants too. So we raised that up as a sharing and a joy for that shared. Another person who's not able to be with us today is Sarah Reeves, who was an assistant pastor, and Rob Grable will bring greetings that she wrote and give to him.
Thank you. I'm happy that Sarah asked me to bring greetings. Deborah and I have been friends with Sarah and David for over 30 years. I've coached both their kids in soccer, and Sarah and I conspired to work on UNICEF for decades, and she's happy that we're still doing it. So this is from Sarah Drew Reeves, Associate Pastor, 1985. Make a joyful noise to the Lord. Hurrah. Congratulations on 250 years of worship. Serve the Lord with gladness. A quarter millennium with the aspiration and, at times, the fullness of serving the Lord in this community, in this nation, on this blue-green marble. Serving the being present in all creation, even in us, who bends the arc of the universe towards justice and love with gladness. Congratulations. Amen. From Sarah.
And our final former clergy greeting will be offered by Bob Keene. It was something that David Yon wrote and sent to him that we might all share.
Thank you, Mandy. It is a great pleasure and an honor for me to read David's greeting to us. David Yon was our pastor at the tumultuous times of the Vietnam War, the lettuce boycotts, and so he was a stalwart for keeping the message of Christ alive in our church. David writes, "One of the greatest privileges of my 50 years of ministry was the opportunity to serve the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College. They are deeply cherished years, as are the deeply cherished friendships, so many of which have lasted a lifetime. One of my most happy joys was that it was always our ministry, for it was all three of us, myself, Reverend Jim Kavanaugh, and Reverend Harvey Pinion, working together with you in the congregation. From Jim's work with a coffee house ministry to Harvey's establishment of the original Mary Hitchcock Hospital chaplaincy ministry, all of you, members of the congregation, were active, included, and participants. Memories, so many of them. If I were to select one that illustrates UCC DC at its very best, I am always drawn back to that fateful night when the Northeast Airlines plane struck Moose Mountain, in which 32 people were killed. many girls coming in for a Dartmouth weekend. Jim and I headed to the visible flames and climbed to the crash site where we provided help to survivors. When we came down, Jim located himself at the church, which became the official gathering site for relatives and the dead, and he did several funerals. Harvey was at the hospital for the injured and their families, and I was at the National Guard Armory, which was the morgue, to aid the police in helping the relatives find their burned, departed members. Members of the church provided transportation, housing, food, and comfort for the many, many grieving people who descended on Hanover. It was a moment in time to which everyone was needed, and CCDC responded. We all worked these ministries for more than a week. It was the church being the church. That is what the Church of Christ of Dartmouth College means to me, the church. The blessings of our Lord Jesus Christ are with you, my sisters and brothers at CCDC, for another 250 years plus. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, so much for sharing those words from David Yan. I'm struck that they're almost hard words to hear, such a stark memory of such a difficult and painful time. And yet he raises up exactly the point of the church. We are not a quasi-country club. We are not simply a place to gather with people that we like and appreciate and admire. We are not a place to come together to feel good about ourselves, but we are rather a place to be accessible to the world in brokenness and pain, to stand up for justice, to ensure that our community is tenderly cared for and that our community is the whole wide world. I'm struck by all the ways in which people brought memories that speak about the reach of the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College that goes to the ends of the earth, the Christmas market with a difference, and all the other ways in which we have been blessed to be a part of a larger ministry that circles the globe. So thank you all so much for being with us today, for honoring these folks who have served, knowing that each clergy person is only able to do their work in the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College because of the laity who work with them, who offer respect and support and ideas and challenges, who enable the church to be the wholeness of who we are. We would love to open this time up now for anyone who'd like to make a comment. And we don't know what this will be like. It may be a little bit of just chaos, but we're hoping the Holy Spirit will help us to do that. I would also like you all to know that I have received permission from all of the clergy who participated today to share their contact information with you in the next week's CCDC Times electronically. So if there's anybody you want to follow up with or send a card to, that information will be in the CCDC Times, or you could call the church office. I remind you that Kendra is in the office on Wednesdays, but you could email her anytime. So if anyone has a comment that they'd like to make, Henry and I are managing this screen. Put your hand up and we'll unmute you and you can say whatever you'd like. Oh, so Bradley, Henry.
Unmute, you're on mute.
Hi, this is Ann and Dave Bradley, and we are delighted to be part of this amazing meeting. It is really something else. Dave and I moved here in 1965 in June, and in August, we had our second child baptized, and it went on from there to weddings and this and that. And Carla, I'm glad to see you're still knitting, and it was wonderful to get the parish nurse program going, which is still happening, and it's a real service to the community. So anyway, great to see everybody.
Thank you so much, Anne. Anyone else have a comment to make? Keep waving your hand because we're having to go through 3 screens. Delightful to have so many folks on board.
Was that good? Was that okay?
Who's that? Is CDC? It's CCD. Who is that?
You.
No,
No.
but there's a gentleman who's putting his hand up who's actually right beside you on the screen. It says CCD, Henry. Do you see who that is? Oh, it says guest. You're unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Hi, I'm Priscilla Wiseman.
Yes, Priscilla.
Mandy, I just have to say, thank you so much. This has been an excellent, excellent afternoon listening to all of this history. Back on the 200th anniversary.
Priscilla.
Oh, yeah. The 200th anniversary of the Church of Christ, my late husband Roger and I were co-chairman of the celebration, and we did not have the luxury of digital technology. And this has just been so wonderful for you to go through all of this. And I remember all of the ministers and their families so fondly. Thank you for doing such an excellent job of bringing this all to the congregation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Priscilla. And I do want to say this has really been a COVID silver lining. Had we not been at this stage in our lives and not learned how to do this technology, we would not have probably had nearly as many clergy, folks from Colorado and other places that are so far away. So this is an extraordinary gift to us. We can certainly miss the fact that we're not able to spend long visiting time together and to gather in person. But because of the pandemic, we've learned how to gather from far distances. And we are so tickled that we've been able to have so many people be present who didn't have to travel. Anyone else have a comment you'd like to make? Oh, Rob Grable.
This is for John Vanderzee, and this is in response to the comment, I think, from Janet about our church being formative. Our church is still formative. We have here in the meeting a young man who grew up in this congregation, who went to Princeton, who just graduated from Boston University School of Theology and is in discernment, and even as we speak is writing his ordination paper so that he can become a hospital chaplain. So CCDC is still churning out members in discernment, facing ECs and ordination papers. So John Torrey, we're so proud of you and so delighted that this church is still cranking them out.
I have a question. I've been having trouble with my device, and I've missed most of this. Is there some way I can get this this afternoon?
Barbara, we are recording it, and I'll need help turning it into a format that you can appreciate. But yes, we have a recording. Unfortunately, I forgot to start recording until after John and Rob talked about the bat and the gift, but we started when Gordon was speaking. So you'll be able to hear from Gordon Rankin's comments on, and then the service is available on YouTube.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, when I think about John Torrey, who's been a part of this church as he has done his formation for ministry, and I think about Shana saying it was her first church. I hope this is my last call, and yet I am equally impressed and humbled and honored and intimidated as you were, Shana, in the beginning of your ministry here, and everyone else. It's an extraordinary group of people who give selflessly and fully of themselves over and over again. Anyone else have comments you'd like to make or greetings you'd like to bring? Bob Keene.
I just wanted to say, I was a confirmand in 1948 and have been a member of the church ever since. And it's been a powerful part of my life. And I am in deep gratitude for all the effort that has gone into pulling this off. And I look forward to another at least 360 days of celebration of our 250th anniversary. Thank you, everyone. And it's just so great to see all those wonderful former pastors and friends and associate pastors. And have a great day and stay well.
Thank you so much, Bob. One of the things that we discovered as we got ready to organize today's events was that there is no master list of the clergy who have served at the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, a member of the United Church of Christ. And we really need to make sure that that does not carry on. So we are thrilled. I want to especially thank Janet Cooper Nelson for helping me find a few people, and also Kath Cunningham, who helped. That was Mary Kath Cunningham. It was really great to get those connections. Anyone else? But or we'll free you to enjoy. Oh, Janet Cooper Nelson. Henry, can you unmute her?
There we go. I just wanted to say, right in the New Hampshire conference is further proof of what we're talking about. David Grishaw Jones is serving in the Dover Church and came all the way back from the West Coast to get closer to CCDC. But David would say, because of his work in the refugee resettlement work that the church was doing, and that his classmate at Dartmouth helped him to see about Cambodian and Hmong and Lao neighbors and friends who came to cold places like the Upper Valley to get from the camps that they were in. That work transformed his head and his heart, and off he went to divinity school. And I'm thinking John Vanderzee and Mary Kath, I'm thinking about Bob Kiefer, who is serving out and about. But there are just a whole host of folks who, if they were all on this call, would keep you all day saying that their life and their love of their churches where they are really was brought to life because you didn't holler at them when they rode the bicycle down the center aisle to do the children's sermon, or when the bats got loose in the Bouchel, no, not in the Kate Sanborn room, and then crawled through the youth fellowship and into the apartment under the door, scaring the living life out of all of us. It was chaos in one way, but it was such joyful, I would argue, church-filled chaos, because those same students were up in the middle of the night and across the parking lot to welcome people to the hospital who'd come with sick children or whatever, and make the beds and do the laundry and shovel the snow early in the morning before the custodian could get in so that the daycare center could work. That vitality in this church is so like the story that David Yon told of the airplane crash. It wasn't all in dire circumstances, it was every day. And I can think of the moment when my mouth hurt so badly that I didn't know what else to do but call Bob Keene. And when I should have been in church, he took the morning off and I took the morning off, and we were on the path to greater health. John Sibley and I commuted from Cambridge, and Jean and Steve cooked. There just are 1,000 stories like that here. And however that vitality and that warmth and that wovenness, that's what's welcomed people. And it's just amazing to see that it's continuing. It isn't any one group of us. It's something about the life and spirit of Christ Jesus in this church that just keeps moving forward. So I still think of you guys as my home church. I belong to about 3 more UCC churches, but sorry guys, you're still my home. And thank you for being that.
Amen. I don't think there's anything else we need to say beyond that, Janet, but I do hope that there will be a compilation and a sharing of all of these extraordinary stories over this year as we try to capture our 250th and as we prepare to live into the next 250. I am so honored by each and every one of you, by your time, by your spirit, by your graciousness. This is an extraordinary church, and we serve an amazing God who encourages us to find beauty and reverence in all of life. So bless you all. Now, may you know God's grace. May you move forward in God's mercy. May you love all of life. And may the Church of Christ at Dartmouth College be a part of what equips and sustains and brings you joy. Amen. God bless you all. Be in peace.